And you're 100% right. It is vague. It is vague and not easy to quite grasp, like how different your invention needs to be patentable. I mean, I think it's pretty clear to everyone that in order for something to be patentable, it has to be different. Like, you know, so in the beginning of your question, you say you invented practically the same thing. So obviously, if it was the same thing, you can't patent it again. And just a little detour here, it's like the fact that someone else had a patent in 2002 that was abandoned, that doesn't then mean that you can go ahead and patent the same thing. It's still prior art to you. Like you're still going to be judged against whatever was out there in public or what was in a patent application previously, you know, a published patent application that is, or if they got the patent. That doesn't really matter for determining how new your idea is. It's still going to be judged against that, whether that application was abandoned and never patented, or whether they had a patent and the patent is now expired. So it's kind of like the patent for the light bulb expired more than 100 years ago. That means anyone can make the product now, but it doesn't mean that anyone can go and get a patent on the light bulb again because it's not new. Great. Now that we have that clear, let's move on into the next part of the question as far as it being vague, or the guidelines for how different it needs to be, those being vague. So true. It's vague. It's hard to really wrap your mind around how different it needs to be. And the actual standard that we use doesn't help very much until you have some experience with it. The standard is obviousness. And what that means is that if your invention is not identical to things that exist, but it kind of falls within the range of what other people already would know, people in the field would know to do or think to do, then that's probably obvious. So an example of that might be, I don't know, you have a pen and you say, I'm going to make an 11-inch ballpoint pen. And the truth is, if the patent examiner looked, they might not be able to find an example of a pen that was specifically 11 inches long. But if all of the rest of the ballpoint pen is the same, then the question becomes, would it be obvious to someone in the field to make a pen any length? And the answer is probably yes. Is that people in the field probably know that you could adjust those components to be whatever length you want, if that's what you wanted. And so it pretty much falls within the range of what people within the field know that they could do, even that if no one has specifically chosen to do exactly that, that's what would be considered obvious. And now often we'll differ in opinion with the patent office about what's obvious and what's not obvious. I mean, you know, a lot of times we'll submit a patent application and it'll be rejected. And the examiner will say, this is obvious. And then we need to combat that with arguments of why it's not obvious. And this is often the contention that we go through. This is the discussion that we typically have at the Patent and Trademark Office. But when I see certain projects, when people come to me with something, I can point out the outliers. I could point out the things that's clearly going to be obvious, or that's clearly going to be non-obvious, and it's very, very likely we're going to get a patent. Most of the rest of it falls somewhere in the middle. And yes, you're right, it's kind of vague. And one of the reasons why it's vague is there's a matter of opinion in there of what obviousness really is, what obvious really means. But again, with the right guidance, you can get a feel for whether you're headed for something which is just, it's never going to work because it's definitely going to be obvious, or it's got a good shot. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. We do this every Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific. You can click the link in the post to be invited to join us on the Zoom, so you could then ask me anything about patents and trademarks.